Hey gang, Dr. G, Imaginarium. Well, it's Friday, so that means Mental Health Monday. Today we're going to continue on our self-esteem series on ways that you can help improve your self-esteem, practical, straightforward ways. And today I'm talking about 3 self-esteem killers. These are things that are operating in the background of our culture that tend to drag people down. And the first one is the mainstream media. Now, what the problem with the mainstream media depictions that you see are, in other words, our TV shows, movies, so forth, is in their depiction of so-called normal, regular people. And as we all know, the people that are on these shows are not regular, normal, everyday people. They're actors. They've spent a ton of money on looking stupendously awesome. There's a whole team of people there to make sure they have the perfect clothing and make sure that the setting looks awesome. And that's all well and good for a fictional story. And it is intended to be entertainment. So I don't think anybody's insidiously trying to make you feel lesser, but the effect is potentially still there for us to unconsciously compare ourselves to these people that live in the perfect apartment and they have their various trials and tribulations, and then everything turns out in the last 15 minutes of the TV show. What I'm concerned about is that if you watch a lot of this stuff, you may come away from it thinking, I don't look good enough, my apartment's not good enough, the stuff I have isn't good enough, because I'm unconsciously comparing it to the people I see on these shows who are presumably giving us a picture of, quote, real people, unquote. Now, the only alternative to this would be the so-called unscripted TV shows. And don't get me started on that stuff, because that's anything but approaching reality. So that's number one. Number 2 is advertising. Now, advertising is an endemic thing that's in our society. It's been there for a long time. There's always been advertising, I think, but really with the advent of television, we now have it pumped into our house 24/7. And the problem with advertising is not in principle that there is anything particularly evil about it, really. It's just that their job is to convince you that your life isn't interesting enough or good enough in some way or measure without the product that they're trying to sell you. And even though there's a very distinct difference between wanting and needing something, advertisers blur that, deliberately or not. And they're going to use every trick in the book that they can find to convince you that you need A, B, or C. Now, the way to do that then is to instill in you a desire or want for whatever product it is. And I think that when you see enough of this, you may be at risk for having an unconscious a comparison again to, gosh, my life's just not adventurous enough. It's not interesting enough. My partner is not fabulous and beautiful enough, or I'm not beautiful enough for them, and so forth. It's just on and on and on. And you're getting bombarded with this stuff from a small child. Now, think about that for a second. Advertisers learned a long time ago that they don't have to go through the parents anymore. They used to have to do that back in the 50s. But when the 60s and 70s came along, they figured out that children are watching television on their own, so they can just market directly to children. And anyone who's watching this that's roughly my age, it's too late. You've already been exposed to that kind of stuff for a long time. So, I'm not trying to be paranoid here. I just wanted to think about how that may have affected you, and it may have instilled a number of, again, unconscious expectations that are difficult, if not impossible, to meet, thereby making you constantly feel like you don't measure up and you're not good enough. That's a problem. Now, the third one I want to talk about is disconnection, and that's caused not only by the mainstream media, but social media in particular. And it can also be caused by mainstream media in a particular subculture. Now, if you're part of a group of people whose belief systems is slightly different from the so-called mainstream, all right, which I don't believe that there is really a mainstream culture, but the mainstream media gives you the illusion that there is. long story short, what I'm trying to get at is the television shows and comedies and dramas and all of that stuff is going to have a set of values instilled in the story. That's just the nature of story. And if it doesn't match exactly what your surrounding community is, there's a potential for disconnection there. For example, we have seen that when westernized mainstream media outlets find their way into cultures for the first time, there are often a large upsurgence in eating disorders in those cultures. We've seen this in South America and other places. So what's doing that? Well, the media is doing that. It's instilling this need that people have, and it particularly hits young people the hardest because they're starting to develop their social consciousness. Now, social media does this by getting you invested in digital connections rather than real world face-to-face connections. There's a whole lot of interaction that goes on that's nonverbal that you're missing in social media. Social media also has the same problem that the mainstream media does, in the sense that it can instill unrealistic expectations. It can encourage people to post the perfect version of their life, which doesn't really exist. And then people look at that and they think, gosh, my life kind of sucks compared to that. And so before you know it, you're already thinking that you're not enough, that you're not good enough, that your life is miserable, that you're going down the tube, so forth and so on. How do we fix this? All right. So those three things are a problem. And I think they are contributors to widespread low self-esteem. Well, of course, the one major fix is to just turn it off, right? Or at least limit it. I think it's important that whatever it is that you use for entertainment, you want to recognize that, especially when it comes to advertising, they are deliberately trying to manipulate you. So you need to be on guard for that. You need to be on watch for that. Now, it's not just regular advertisements that we're looking at here. Advertisers have known for a long time that product placement can win over sales. So they'll take what you might just consider to be pure entertainment, and they'll put advertisements in it there. This was particularly prevalent in the 80s when toy manufacturers were deliberately creating cartoons like He-Man with the sole purpose of selling toys. Ever heard of the Transformers franchise? Multi-million, if not billion-dollar movies. They're selling you something, okay? That might be entertaining and it might be fun and all that, and that's fine, but it is an advertisement and it's an attempt to manipulate you, okay? So my point is that I want to raise awareness about this. I want to give you the tools to recognize when these sorts of things are happening, because context is everything. You'll be at less risk for these things pulling at your self-esteem if you have awareness of it. The other one, of course, is to make sure that you maintain healthy face-to-face social contacts, because all of the stuff that I've talked about are things that pull you away from that. And as I've mentioned many times on this channel, human beings are not really meant for that. Human beings are set up emotionally and evolutionarily to be interacting with face-to-face human beings. And that's one of those things that continues to maintain our sense of belonging, which is intimately tied with self-esteem. Okay, so that's what I've got for you today on this Mental Health Monday. It is Friday after all. If you really like this, make sure you practice what we're talking about. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. It helps the mysterious and nebulous algorithm help raise awareness for this content. And of course, also check out my website, ericgoodwyn.com. Sign up for the newsletter for free exclusive content. So that's what I've got today on this Mental Health Monday, Friday. If you're wondering why I do it like that, well, it's a metaphor. Figure it out. See you next time.